So I didn't really come up with this title, just so you guys know. This everything in between kind of scares me a little bit in this title. So, I've got 40 minutes to deliver you everything. Richard Feynman once said that, if you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you first have to create the universe. So we're not really going to go through that expanse here, but hopefully give you a good idea of what's going on. So let's go through my objectives here and what we're going to try to achieve. So first of all, we're going to understand the intent of validation. We hear about it a lot in our industries, but we're going to try to understand the intent. It's actually pretty simple. We're going to learn some common terminology. That's one thing that really confuses a lot of people, is we throw out IQ, OQ, PQ, and we expect you to know what that means, and people are just like, start getting a little scared. Learn why proper risk assessment is essential to a validation strategy. Validation process and life cycle we'll go over. And learn strategies for major upgrades, minor upgrades, and updates. So this is probably one of the biggest portions of this, in that we'll go over what you need to do when you're doing a major upgrade, what you need to do when you're doing a minor upgrade, and then just if you're doing a patch update. And then learn some of the common pitfalls of validation, go over basically what the FDA wants out of us here. So first of all, what is the intent of validation? Okay? Why do we validate? Anybody want to throw me an answer? I won't even ask you to raise your hand.
Make sure your system works.
There you go. Okay, so there's really mainly two reasons, all right? First of all, government and industry regulations. The FDA says we have to, right? How many of you guys are unfortunate enough to be in med device? Oh man, I feel for you. Because your regulations say that everything you use has to be validated, right? And so you get that all the time. It's like, oh, we got to validate this thing again, right? So government and industry regulations is the first reason, and the second is we establish trust in the system, right? We want to know exactly how it's going to perform in our environment, okay? Now, here's the thing. We can't guarantee that our environment is identical to your environment. The IQs and so forth, they do a great job of, whoops. Apparently I didn't follow the process lines. They do a great job of setting forth the expectations and laying a good groundwork for us, but your internal network may be different than what our internal network and how we test it and so forth. So you guys still need to go through your testing to make sure that it's going to operate the way that you expect it to operate, okay? The bulk of validation paperwork is testing. Have you guys ever seen the OQ in its entirety for master control? I feel your pain. I'm sorry. It is ridiculously large. I mean, just a volume. It looks like Webster's Dictionary of paperwork that goes in the testing that we do on the system when we create the TOQ and those things. So that's where a lot of our paperwork comes from. So some of the vocabulary that you'll hear us use, okay? First of all, the IQ. This is the installation qualification, okay? Basically, this is the document that tells you that the install has been done to the standards that we set forth in the system. So we check hardware, software requirements, we check, make sure ports are open, all sorts of little technical stuff in there. And then if you've seen those scripts, they're all laid out. They're pretty exact and exactly what we need to do. The OQ, this is the operational qualification, okay? The operational qualification basically is the proof that the system does what we designed it out to do in the first place, okay? So they're the tests directly related to the FRS. So who here has heard of the FRS? So FRS, Functional Requirement Specifications. This is basically what product management does for us. They write these things and they say, we need the product to be able to do this. And then the OQ goes back in there and it tests it. Make sure, hey, it does this as the FRS states. Also, by the way, if you guys have any questions throughout this, feel free to interrupt me. I don't like the sound of my voice that much, so you're welcome to do that. TOQ. This is the Transfer Operation Qualification. How many people have TOQ here? It's really going to be a key part in the validation strategy for anybody that doesn't have it. And it's something that you probably want to look into if you don't have it. But it's something that the transfer OQ is an OQ that we executed here in-house for all the modules of master control. And then we provide that documentation to you, and you guys say, you know what, we trust the master control set this up the way said that they have, and we accept this OQ instead of us going through hours and hours and hours and hours of executing it. Although if you ever really want to learn the system and know where everything is, the OQ is a great place to look. The ATOQ, this is the automatic transfer operational qualification. Okay, so anytime you see this A in front of our nomenclatures, usually stands for automatic or automated. Okay, and this is the TOQ document that's at least partially performed by an automated testing utility. Now, we couldn't get through all of our OQs that we have for master control without this kind of system in place. And in fact, I'd say roughly about 60% of all of our tests are automated now at this point for the OQ. So we can cycle faster, release faster, and get through testing. The PQ, this is a performance qualification. And these are what you guys are really concerned about, right? You're like, okay, I need to know that our system is going to operate the way that I want it to operate. And that is written in URS, which is user requirement specifications. For your end users, we want this route to go to this person and to go to the next person, so on and so forth. Your PQ will test your URS. And then ultimately, just for the purposes of this class, there's plenty of other vocabulary that we could get to. The trace matrix, okay? The trace matrix basically links the functional tests from the FRS or the URS and the PQ together. So our requirements here on 1.1 say that we need to be able to publish the document, and then we test that in the PQ for test 2.3 or whatnot. So that's how you link those two up and prove that you've done your portion of validation. Does anybody have any questions? Sure. Sure. The TOQ, absolutely, yes. So part of the TOQ is that you do run a risk assessment on accepting our document. We'll talk about risk in a little bit, right? And once you accept it, it becomes your document, right? And it is something that you can produce in the time of an audit. Absolutely. Good question. Anybody else? Okay. All right, so who's responsible for all these Qs? Okay, we got tons of qualifications. Who does it fall to? So for the IQ, we actually provide you guys the IQ, and my team, well, I'd say we do an excellent job of executing these and providing them to you. But that is something that Master Control provides to you. It's part of your installation purchase, or also your MSA covers the upgrade. And so we perform these for you. So you don't have to worry so much about that other than just getting them pre-approved so you guys review them before you accept them into your validation plan. The OQ. So the OQ, if you decide to go solo, that actually ends up being your responsibility. However, if you have the TOQ purchased, then you adopt ours, and then we provide it to you. So you don't have to worry about going through and testing the OQ.
What do you mean by solo?
So you could execute an OQ on Master Control. We provide you the documentation, and you execute each step of the OQ yourself, right, where you go through that. And when you do that, that's you just testing in-house to make sure it's designed to Master Control specifications. What you're really interested in, though, is whether it's going to meet what you want it to do. So that's where the PQ comes into play. So the OQ, we actually write those scripts, but if you're going to have those documents, you have to do the testing yourself or purchase the TOQ, and then we'll provide completed executed documents to you. I'm not in sales, so I couldn't tell you. I want to say that the initial investment is $6 grand. Is it higher than that? I can't remember. I can't remember exactly what it is. So I can find out.
We're doing that right now.
Are you? Yeah, it really is,
So
right? So the TOQ is really where it comes into value. The nice thing about the TOQ is that you purchase it once, and as long as you pay your MSA on it, it still renews. So when you upgrade, you get the new TOQ, so you don't have to do it again. So it's like the fountain of youth when it comes to validation. Now PQs, these are scripts that you guys need to write yourself, or you contract with Master Control to write them. And they are ultimately your responsibility, but we can lend assistance in their validation and testing. Any questions?
What kind of documentation
Certainly. I mean, so there's always the release notes, right? With each patch and with each upgrade that we release, we have release notes. And basically the release notes will come in and they will log everything that's changed in the system, such as, okay, we found this bug, we fixed it. We found this bug, we fixed it, or we added an enhancement. When we get to the point of doing upgrades, then we have enhancements that come into play as well. But that's the first line of defense for you guys is to evaluate those, and we'll get into that in just a little bit more too. We're going to talk about that. Yes, we'll talk about that. So, first of all, let's talk about risk, okay? And it's more than just a board game that divides families and pits friends against each other. Has anybody ever played Risk and not ended up in a fight? You always get you got 3 armies that go in and wreck out an entire country, and you're just like, oh. Anyway, so why do we use a risk-based approach? Well, first of all, the best reason is if we didn't use risk, we could test till we're blue in the face and we never get finished, okay? What risk allows us to do is evaluate where we are, where we want to be, and what potential pitfalls that we have going forward and how to best mitigate those, okay? So risk also allows us to adopt new technologies faster. So, first of all, browsers. How many of you guys here are ready to get off of IE? Woo! Yeah. But browsers is the big one, right? So we have Chrome, for example, that now has deprecated Java. Okay, so there's no more Java support available in Chrome. Well, we've got to be able to do something about that. Risk will help us. Risk assessment will help us figure out what's the path that we need to take in order to upgrade to something that we need. New HTML5 features, new versions of Master Control will leverage this kind of stuff. MS Office, Adobe PDF, you guys kind of get the idea. There's a lot of third-party elements that come into play with Master Control, especially when you're uploading documents into it. So there's a lot of times where your IT is saying, hey, we need to upgrade to Office 2013, and you're stuck on Master Control 9. You guys can't upgrade yet, right? Because you can't publish those documents. You need this version. There's been several of you, I'm sure, that have run into that kind of situation. So another good thing about using a risk-based approach is that you can implement features every 3 months rather than 3 years. Because that allows us to shorten the time between when we release, when you guys adopt Master Control and put it into your production, you're going to get value every 3 months when we're doing our frequent release program if you adopt on that versus waiting 3 years in between, okay? And it helps you assess the appropriate level of testing and mitigation. So this is risk like super simplified, okay? It's boiled down to the basic components. We've got step one, basically you evaluate whatever risk, you come together, you decide what are the risks that we have of upgrading, okay? We know this bug exists, for example, and you evaluate the risk of seeing that in your environment. And then determine how to mitigate that risk if it's needed. and implement that agreed upon action, okay? Some of the specifics related to master control are you evaluate the risk of making changes to your system, change control, okay? Evaluate the risk of upgrading by going through release notes for the new version. So we talked about this just briefly. This is one of your best tools. Is you're going to be able, every time you release, we have a new patch. You guys can download the release notes. You can take a look at them and evaluate the risk of running into this bug that we found in the software, right? And bugs should be categorized by a corresponding risk value. I'll show you a little risk matrix here in a second that'll help you understand where we're going with this. And the higher the number, the higher the amount of risk that you have by either not patching or continuing to run and being upgraded. And then you also need to evaluate the risks of not upgrading, right? Because there's no perfect software out there, guys. I hate to break it to you. We're going to find bugs. Just like there's no perfect people out there, there's no perfect system. But there are risks associated with not upgrading, okay? And so you need to make sure you understand that you're going to run the system in a state where there are known bugs that could affect your environment. And this is where reading those release notes and evaluating that is going to help you make some choices that are very good for you and your company. So this is what a risk matrix looks like. Okay, how many of you guys have seen this before or something similar to it, right? And so let's say, for example, that I read the bugs and I have a live version of documents in my system. And we found a bug that on a route where we have an escalation step, that it's not routing to that escalation step properly, okay? You know you use this feature in your system, you read this note, and it's in your current version, okay? So we need to rate how likely it's going to happen and how severe it does when it does happen. And that really depends on the route and what kind of document it is and all sorts of other factors that we just can't know intrinsically, right? So first of all, let's say that it's a route that has an escalation about your potluck dinner that you guys are planning, right? I've seen this in master control. I'm not even joking. There's companies that have this stuff in there, like, put in what you're bringing to the potluck. But, so, there's an escalation step. If you don't get it in, then you've got someone over there that's going to come bang on your door and say, hey, why aren't you just doing whatever? So, really, the severity is probably 1, right? You're not going to be worried about the severity of this happening. Like, if this does happen, nothing critical is going to go down or anything like that. You're going to get razzed by your coworkers. Probability, though, may be that it's fairly probable that it will happen. But that still puts it in the acceptable risk range, right? And you just need to monitor that. Now, if this is a formulation for a new drug that you guys are releasing or a revision on your CAD drawings for a medical device, that's going to raise that significantly. And you could end up here into the moderate or even catastrophic, where you'd be like, whoa, hold the phone. We absolutely cannot have this happen because it's going to cost us tons of money, so we need to get this fixed. So because you're evaluating the risk, you're going to be able to recognize that and know that you guys need to upgrade and put in a plan to action. Most of the time, it's going to be getting it fixed through an upgrade. You may have a question. I see a lot of people sleeping, so like feed you like crazy over here. Yeah, no kidding. This shirt fit when I got it. You guys. So, all right. So the validation life cycle. This is your validation life cycle, okay? And you notice that there is no end to this cycle, okay? It's not like you get to a validated state. We've done our IQ, OQ, PQ. We're done. Never have to worry about validation again. We'll just keep the system the way it is now, perfect. It's a shell. It's not going to happen that way. You still need to work to get it, maintain that validated state. So we talked about the IQ, the OQ, the PQ, and we're going to talk about validation maintenance plan just briefly here. So you want to have a plan in place. Holy cow, this is going way too fast. Sorry. So you want to have a plan in place that allows you to make changes to your system. Okay. Change control. How many of you guys utilize change control in your manufacturing processes and so forth? It's the same way with validation. You guys need to exercise change control on your system. You need to evaluate the risks of making changes in the system before you put them in place and evaluate how you mitigate that risk. The same type of thing. So let me tell you something. Anytime you guys call tech support, you have a potential for a change control that you may need to launch internally. Because, well, we know the problem we know the solution to this problem that you're having. We just need to up the memory that we are allocating to Blue Dragon. How many of you guys have heard that one? Quite a few, right? Did you do a change control for that? Good. If you didn't, bad. Because you need to. You need to know the risks. Okay, well, I need to understand what this does for our entire system if we up this memory, right? What's it going to do? Does our servers, are they able to support this kind of capacity? You need to go through that process. And if you don't, then you open yourself up to a world of hurt. So, this is skeptical third world kid. No, it's not a one-time event. So what's your maintenance plan include? So you need to have a strategy for point upgrades, okay? You also need risk assessment procedures contained in there, change control procedures, a deviation process when things go wrong. How many? Who's ever had a perfect implementation in their life? No one. I'm not. Brian, you don't count. Nobody has a perfect implementation, so you need to have a deviation process when things go awry for your document. That comes up clear in just a second here. So, this is the flow that you would expect when you're doing a major upgrade. So this is an upgrade from like 10.x to 11x. Who here is on version 10? Okay, how many people are on version 11? Okay, anybody on anybody before 10? No? Oh, that makes me so happy. Okay, that's great. So first of all, you need to review the release notes and do your risk assessment on those notes. Evaluate the bugs, evaluate any new features that you want to take advantage of. Launch your change control when you guys decide that you want to upgrade. Install an IQ. So this is different than what we've done previously. Normally we would just upgrade prod, test, and dev. In this case, since we're going to require for version 11 a new server set, we're actually installing all 3 sites at the same time if possible, because it's completely different the way that we do things from version 10. Okay, so we'll install prod, test, and dev at the same time. Do your OQ or accept the TOQ, and then do full PQ. Okay, so this is the same. It's basically what you guys executed at the time of your original install. You would execute the same thing with modifications included for the new features that you guys want to take advantage of to make sure everything works the way it's supposed to. And then we do a cutover dry run. That means we bring your data from your test into your production, and we go through the paces to make sure it upgrades successfully. You guys get to view it in there. And then finally, a final cutover, which is right before you guys go live, and then go live. Okay, so that's your major upgrade flow, and that's what you're going to see and what you should expect when it goes there. So a minor upgrade. So this is something like 11.3 to 11.4. Okay, 11.4 just released yesterday, everybody. Woo! Be happy about that. It's actually really cool. So once again, you still need to review the release notes, do your risk assessment. You need to evaluate the bugs, evaluate the new features, launch change control, upgrade an IQ test and dev, OQ or a TOQ acceptance, mini PQ. So this is where we get down to business critical processes. We don't need to test everything in the system again because not everything has changed. All we're doing is we're going to go in there, we're going to condense down the PQ into the stuff that's absolutely business critical, and then we test against that, right? And that's part of our documentation. Upgrade the production site and then go live with it, okay? Patch update flow. So this is something that's like 11.3x to 11.3x plus 1. We come out with patch updates every week for our current versions, okay? So that would be 11.2 and 11.4 now will have a patch update. that come out. So you need to review your release notes and risk assessment, evaluate the bugs, launch change control. So here the biggest difference is the patch updates only contain P1 critical bugs, and so there's much less of them that you have to evaluate, and you're not doing anything for new enhancements. Install and test a dev, mini PQ. So this is, once again, your critical business processes, and even you can get away with even less. If you write your validation document correctly, you can get away with user acceptance testing, where you go through and you do positive flow, where you just go in and you test, and you just say, okay, I need to just make sure this route works. Click, 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 done. Great, move on to the next thing. If you identify your business critical needs first, it's going to make this a whole lot easier. You better bring in your stakeholders, get to talk to them, and get their input. Because I guarantee how you think that you're using the system is different from how the users think that they're using the system. So you need to make sure you integrate those people in here. You're going to upgrade production after that, and then you go live. Okay, so major upgrades are kind of like eating a whale. Anybody ever read Shel Silverstein? This is one of his illustrations. So the reason why is because between version 10 and version 11, we had over 4,000 bugs that were fixed between initial 10 release and version 11 release. Who wants to sit there and read those notes? Anybody?
Sure.
Yeah, right? Did you?
No.
Did you go home and cry at night? I would. It's okay. We understand. Minor upgrades, kind of like eating little fish. All right? You're going to have a lot less that are going into these, so your risk is going to be a lot lower too, because the amount of changes isn't 4,000 changes. It's maybe 30 or 40, 100, something like that. Nothing that's on the scale of going through major upgrades. So what is there to learn from this? Why do I give these analogies? Well, I'd rather eat fish 7 times a year than eat a whale once. You're going to get sick to the stomach. Going through a 10 to 11 or a pre-10 to 11 upgrade is a monumental task. There's a lot of things to go through. There's a lot of changes in there. And it's going to take a while. But if you get on the frequent release program, we have 11.3, 11.4 release, and you guys upgrade to those as they come out, you're going to do the process, and you're going to eat a smaller fish each time. Okay? And you're going to get used to it. So, you can purchase them, or you can have them custom written. So we do have some default templates, but also you can engage services to have custom PQs written for your company as well. Yes. No, sorry. If you purchase one of our generic PQs for like documents or something like that, when you upgrade, you receive the new PQs because you're paying MSA on those to keep those current. That's part of MSA. It's a good question. Any other questions? All right, so what is the FDA looking for in an audit? Okay, so let me tell you a little story. I went to Washington, D.C. to do FDA training, and I got to tell you, I left there a little bit more confused than I did when I went in, because I was with like 5 different auditors, and they all told me different things. I asked them the same question. How many of you guys have been through that? Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? Okay, let's boil it down to you real simple like, okay? This is what the FDA is looking for in an audit. First of all, document what you do and do what you document, okay? FDA doesn't care, or auditors don't care what you tell them. They're not going to believe you. If it doesn't exist in writing, it's like it never happened. So that is the cardinal rule of audits. Document what you do and do what you document. So we talked about earlier a validation maintenance plan, right? If you document in there that says, hey, when we go in and we do a minor update or a patch update, we're not going to go through a full PQ. We've ran the risk assessment on it. We know what we're facing. We don't need to do anything super special. We're just going to go through user acceptance testing, do this positive flow where we just go and run through things real quick before we make it live. then that's what you do. And if you have it written and documented, that's your process, right? Now the FDA has like thousands and thousands of guidelines and best practices. They're dizzying, they really are. I've tried reading some of them. And that's why lawyers get paid so much money. $500 an hour to read this? Yeah, that sounds about right. FDA maintains enforcement discretion, okay? So this is something that you guys are probably familiar with. They're like the UHP, or well, I guess the Highway Patrol, right? They can pull you over for anything. They'll find something, trust me. But whether or not they give you a ticket or a warning or a finding on it, it's kind of up to them, right? So if you get an FDA auditor that wants to find something, if they're in a bad mood, you're probably going to have a bad day too. But the severity of their finding will actually depend on what the actual infraction is. So if it's a minor documentation thing, it's not going to be that severe. But if they find out that you didn't bother to go through testing on your system before you upgraded it, 7 versions to a newer, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble, right? If you're regulated by the FDA, this is kind of interesting. This is one of my favorite takeaway from that entire training, is that you're not required to answer any questions the auditor poses to you. Who knew that? You did. That's cool, huh? You don't have to answer anything, but you do have to provide them any document they ask for besides financial data. So that was my favorite takeaway from that training. And now you guys have it, so that's like worth this entire trip. All right, so what does the FDA want to look at in master control? Okay, how many of you guys are doing CAPA? Yeah, they're going to want to see that, okay? They're going to want to see customer complaints. They're going to want to see a list of deviations, training, trainee job codes, statuses, batch release, SOPs, work instructions, NDA, medical device submissions, validation test scripts, and user requirements, and change control. All those things will follow. What's that? No. I'm being liberal here. So let's talk about the consequences of an FDA finding here. So, how many of you guys have gone through an audit where you've had a finding? Yeah. Okay. We're usually going to find something, right? How severe was it? How far along the line did you get? Not too bad. Did you get to the consent decree? Oh. Ouch. Ouch. Oh, okay. Don't hire that guy. So an official audit finding will result in a Form 483, okay? And I love this. Customers are encouraged to put in place corrective action expeditiously. They don't give you really any terms or frame into it. They're just like, do it as fast as you can, right? Otherwise, we're going to step on you, all right? And you have 15 days to respond with your correction action in a timeline, okay? So you're going to say, well, you got to fix this, and you got to respond within 15 days with a timeline on how you're going to correct whatever finding they got, right? And then the finding results are discussed with anybody in the senior management before the conclusion of the inspection. So hopefully it's not them going up there and saying, hey, your master control system is not validated. You're going to be in big trouble. But they do discuss it with all senior management before they leave. And it does not always cause production to shut down. In fact, it rarely does it get to that level, consent decree level. But it is, if it's severe enough, it could get to a warning level status or a consent decree and shut down the production. Okay? So this is a typical escalation. So you've got an audit finding, you get the Form 483, you don't do anything about it, you just sit on it, you get a warning letter, and then eventually you consent, right? Or if it's a really severe audit finding, there we go, you get a Form 83 and you go straight to the consent. Okay? So that can happen. How are we doing on time? 5 minutes? Okay. All right. So consent decrees. What does that fancy word mean? It's an agreement between two parties that is sanctioned by a court. So if you were a company that got a consent decree, it's basically saying that, hey, we won't admit any guilt, but maybe we should do something about this, and we're going to shut down production while we do it, right? And that's all lawyerese. But basically that's what it ends up being. And then at that level, some form of production will be shut down, and you're going to lose. So it's going to be expensive to you. Okay. So just kind of on a side note, I went to a customer it was probably about 3 years ago, where they were under a consent decree. And part of their mitigation process and what they're going to do to get back in the FDA's good graces is they decided they would have their install done on site. Okay, and so I actually had to fly out there, do their install on site. And when I got there, going through their security and everything like that, they hand me a stack of paperwork probably about that thick that explains all the terms of their consent decree. I had to sign it acknowledging that I had received the fact that they are under consent decree and this is what they're going to do to get around it, or to fall back into good graces. So don't want to be there, guys, and I don't think that it's enjoyable for anybody. All right, so some key takeaways. All right, so like this Tyler guy's been rambling on for 40 minutes. What am I going to take away from this? So the first thing is that the validated state is dynamic, okay? It's not something we can just get in there, we get through the IQ, OQ, PQ, we're done. It's not. You guys are going to have to maintain that. Just like you accept patch updates from Microsoft every Tuesday or whatever to any of your systems, you're going to need to evaluate the risk of doing the same thing with Master Control. Accept the updates, get new features, and roll forward. Document what you do and do what you document, okay? This is ultimately what gets people in the most trouble, is when they don't do this, okay? So if you have anything that you're doing, make sure that you're documenting it, okay? And that you follow whatever SOPs, work instructions, etc. that you have out there. And it's a lot easier to swallow a fish than a whale, okay? So don't sit around and wait until 11:17. I don't know how high it's going to go. I'm just throwing that out there. Before you decide you want to upgrade, okay? Stay on the frequent release bandwagon, and they don't look so scary if you're doing them just a little bit at a time. So here's another advantage of doing them just a little bit at a time. You get familiar with the process. Everybody's heard the quote, practice makes perfect, right? If you do it a little bit at a time, you're like, okay, it's time to upgrade. Let me just run through this quick. And you go here. You guys are going to be familiar with the process. And you're going to be able to cut down the time because you're doing it so often that it doesn't feel like you're going into panic mode again to gather everything and get everything you want. And then frequently upgrading helps to mitigate risk. I wouldn't want to operate in an environment where I know bugs exist and they can affect me. So I'm going to try to be up to date on everything that I possibly can. And get the most value out of your MSA. The whole idea behind frequent release is to help you guys take off, swallow smaller chunks of the program and enhancements as we continue to improve Master Control. We've seen 11.5 in the test drive lab. What do you guys think? Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? I'm really excited for that. So you get on the frequent release train, you're going to get value every 3 months. You're going to be able to see that. And it's going to be a lot less of a cost when it comes down to go to senior management and say, hey, we want to validate the new system. It's just going from 11.3 to 11.4. You guys can work it into your budgets and say, hey, we're going to upgrade Master Control 3 to 4 times this year, guys. So we know this is the effort it's going to take us. This is how much money it comes down to, because it all comes down to money in the end. You can propose this and have a high degree of confidence of what exactly you're going to fix. Anyway, that's all I got. So thank you guys for attending. Does anybody have any other questions for me?